Welcome, everyone, to the Career Change Champions podcast. I'm your host, Tonya Montella, and I have with me today Stephanie Moniuk from Knockout Wellness. Stephanie, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Tonya. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you. I'm curious just to get straight into it, just because I think what you do is so interesting. So, would you share for me what it is exactly that you do?
That's a really good question. I knew you were going to leave with something like that. I'm like, all right. So I'm basically at my core, I'm a wellness professional. That's basically what I'm about. It's taken various incarnations over the years of kind of how I go about getting people to wellness and away from pain. I started off in this portion of my journey as a massage therapist, then got into cupping therapy. Now I'm more into the mind body connection, where I'm really working with people's nervous systems to kind of heal those like stubborn recurring injuries, chronic pain, chronic trauma, really about getting rid of chronic emotional and physical pain via the nervous system.
And that's what I find to be so interesting about what you do, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I see it is it really requires you, I mean, you kind of said it yourself, to understand the body, all aspects of the body, as well as the mind. Is that right?
That's pretty fair. It's pretty fair. But the nice thing is I get to pick and choose as far as how deep I want to go with it and what's working and what doesn't, because I am the creator of this. Right. So like, this is me. I don't work for anyone else. So what I'm trying to do with my clients, it's ultimately up to me to figure out what's the right direction that's going to work the best for the client. And then I can get rid of all the other stuff where I think it gets problematic when you're shackled by, we have to do it like this, or we can only do it that way, or the insurance won't pay for this, So I have the freedom to really explore different things. And I use myself as a guinea pig quite often. Find the things that work the fastest, the easiest, because I'm pretty lazy. I'm like, I want something that works really fast. And that seems, if things don't hit me right, I'm not going to include them. So then I sort of create protocols for clients where I introduce a number of different techniques, modalities, what have you, from various disciplines. But that's where that research becomes handy. And the fact that I can self-direct it makes the scope less daunting, because I know, you know what I mean? Like that whole, like, it's the mind and the body, but it is, but you can sort of pick and choose. It doesn't have to be like subject matter expert on every area of everything.
Yep, that makes complete sense. Yeah. So to your point about, your journey has kind of evolved over time. That's brought you to where you are today. I am so interested in getting into that and want to kind of uncover. By the way, have you ever taken time to just kind of reflect on how you got to where you are today?
Not in any formal sense. I think just with age, you start getting a little bit more reflective anyway about, how did I get here? In general. So yeah, a little bit of that, but more, probably more as it relates to my own kind of journey of, like, who am I in my life, and what do I want to be, and who do I want to be, and how do I want to show up? More, I think probably that in that way. Yes.
Yeah. So I want to know all that good stuff. So take me back, and we can go back as far as you want, but I want to understand your journey and what got you here. I want to kind of understand, what career paths you took along the way and some of the things that you thought about and experienced. And so let's go wherever you want to begin. Take me to wherever we should start and tell me what you were doing at that time.
Sure. Yeah. So professionally, I went to art school, but I didn't work in the art field at all professionally. It was just a really bad time. It was the advent of computer graphics. And I was right on the kind of the cusp of that. So if you really weren't full in doing that, it was just a kind of a non-starter. But anyway, that's what my background is in. And then I got into human services with the idea that I wanted to maybe do something on my own, art-wise, and not necessarily work for a company, maybe do more, freelance work. That was sort of always in the back of my mind. And it never really quite manifested itself, because all of it, any self-directed anything takes so much discipline and so much push. And as much as I wanted to, I think I wanted to work for myself. I kind of always knew that. Having the ability to really push and make it happen isn't something that I got to, the discipline to be able to do that. I didn't get to that later in life. So that was kind of a common thread all the way through. So there was that, but I was working in human services. I was always in my, kind of my health insurance job, right? Like I'm doing this for the stability and the paycheck, and can I make something happen, aside from that? And ended up going into the design world a little bit, did some work there for maybe 8 years or so, working in design, and then back into human services again, the stability, the paycheck. I don't know really what I want. And that was really it for a while. And throughout all of that, one of the common themes was that I had chronic back pain. And it started when I was a teenager, was diagnosed in my 20s with the usual laundry list of you've got degenerative disc disease and poor herniated discs and blah, all the bad. And all these dire things, you're probably, I was 20 something. They're like, oh, you've got the lower back of someone that's in their 40s or 50s. I'm like, well, what happens when I'm that age? And they're like, well, it's going to be so bad. And, all the dire stuff. You're probably going to end up on disability in a wheelchair, all this stuff. So that was kind of a common theme, threading through all of this stuff in my life, where my back was good. I had these, ebbs and flows when it was hanging in there, and then other times, nope, I would, I think I had to take a leave of absence from work at one point. It was messy. And then in the midst of that, had a couple back surgeries, and then got just really hooked on the idea that I wanted to get the root to, you want to fix yourself, right? Mm-hmm. I want to get to the root of this. What is this problem? And started doing a ton of research in that direction that led me, I want to go to massage school and kind of learn how to work with people in pain. And it was really just dipping my toe in at that point. And then all of a sudden, again, getting back to what we were saying earlier about being able to direct what you want to learn about or what you need to know in order to help your clients. And that's when I sort of discovered accidentally the whole field of pain science. And the interesting thing that happened was, as I was learning about the science of pain and how it all worked, and this was all self-directed study. I had some researchers, I was following their work. And the interesting thing that happened was I noticed my back pain was getting better just by learning about the mechanisms of pain, the actual mechanisms of pain, that it's not 100% a structural event. And then I was learning about the therapy that they use with their clients. And I'm like, oh, wow, it's actually working on me. Just understanding what it is that they do is having an effect. And then I was just my mind was blown. I'm like, all right, there's a whole piece here that nobody has discussed with me. And essentially what it's talking about is the role of neurology, the role of the nervous system, neuroscience, and the mind-body connection ultimately is what all that is a part of. And it was not anything I had any introduction to at that point. So I, got into that, and all the different things we can tinker with within that connection, on how to get people feeling better. So that's kind of how I went from massage school, into the more of a mind body consulting, I don't know,
yeah.
Intervention design. I mean, it's kind of a little bit of both. People come in and see me, we work on things together. I give them homework. I tell them the things they need to go when they're home. It's not I'm just going to, crank this out and send you on your way and hope for the best. There's an educational piece as well. So it's been it's kind of everything I've done with myself, I've used as I get myself as a guinea pig for sort of the next things I'm trying. And that was, the big piece of it was, again, the education piece. And then the other piece, that emotional piece, which, about my boxing, that was sort of instrumental at that point in time, was that I, once my pain improved so much, I had always wanted to fight. I said, all right, it's now or never. You're not getting any younger. Your back's been pretty good. Let's go for it. And got into boxing. And then that was when I really was able to kind of put the final pieces of the puzzle together, which was that whole piece, that subconscious fear, what a role that plays in us and our bodies in pain, how pain manifests itself. And it was my experience boxing that put me in touch with that emotion of fear that I likely had been repressing my entire life. I like to think probably because it's normal, right? Because if you're boxing and you don't have any kind of fear, there's something wrong with you. Like that's a normal thing. And all of a sudden I was like, what is this strange feeling I'm having here? And I was like, oh, that's fear. Like that's not normal that you don't know what that is. And it got me, again, just got me thinking about, the more research I was doing about, things that set you up for this, and having, the trauma history, which I do, was usually a piece of that. I'd been diagnosed with PTSD when I was in like my 40s. So it was like all of, again, fitting all these puzzle pieces together. That was kind of the final one. And I was like, aha, I think I kind of have it. Like I figured it all out within myself. I got myself to a point where I'm well enough that I'm, fighting, competing, like feeling good. My back was, 99.9%, good, certainly good enough to fight. So that's, and it wasn't with any other additional work other than the mind body stuff I've been doing on myself. So I was like, all right, we need to put this out there and see what happens. Like, right. See if other people, as uncomfortable as I felt doing it, I had a lot of fear around that. Like, what if people think it's weird? What if people think I'm weird? What if people think I'm trying to steal their money? Like, what if people think this is, I don't know, like all the, the fears. But I was like, all right, well, and it's been, so I'm still rolling it out, and it's still in process, I think, of trying to really, get it out in front of as many people as I possibly can to at least, try it. It's certainly something worth exploring.
Yeah.
But that's the next step.
Yeah, no, I love that. You said so much there that I want to drill into a bit. I heard you talk about, I actually heard you talk about your why, because it sounds like it was your own pain that drove you to want to understand pain better. And then once you started your, I would call it love for boxing, right? Like on the side, so to speak, you started to uncover your own experiences with fear. And that's when fear came into it, and the emotion and the mindset things of the picture. So it sounds like every step of the way you were very mindful of your own experiences, and you let that lead you into the next path of things. Is that right?
I'd say that's pretty fair. I actually like how you put it. It was like, yes, it unfolded for me. It was
yeah, but it does. Yeah, I think what's important is that you were mindful of it. You were aware of what was happening in your own personal life. You wanted to solve for it, so you started to dig into it deeper and do your own education. And then as you started to uncover things that were helping you, you wanted to kind of pay that forward, so to speak, and give it on to other people. Because I think what I tend to find, this is true for me and for other people I tend to talk to, is we want to be for others what we wish we had ourselves, right? Like if you had only had someone to help you understand why you were feeling the pain that you were feeling and how you could mitigate it earlier on, maybe you wouldn't have gone so long with your back pain, right?
Oh, yeah. So that's very true.
So you being the caring person you are and having that empathy because you went through it yourself, are feeling like, I want to help other people that are experiencing something similar, not exact, right? Like I'm sure there's a myriad of reasons people come to you, but yeah, that's really interesting that's kind of how it all unfolded for you. I like that.
Yeah. And I like that. And I think it's one of those things where you don't, when it's yourself, you can't quite get that distance to
exactly
to get the macro view of like, oh, that's what was happening, because it feels like, why can't I get my shit together? When you're sort of like finding your way, and I think that's a big, probably a big reason why people get discouraged. That the first iteration of their idea isn't the one that, it's not working out, that they're like, oh, it's me or whatever, instead of like, oh, just keep on, if you keep going and you keep trying different things, it's gonna filter out the things that aren't working. And you're gonna be able to, to tune into the things that do work.
And another thing you talked about that I liked was some of the self-doubt and the questions that popped up for you along your journey. Like, what are people
Mm-hmm.
going to think? Or,
Mm-hmm.
how is this going to be received or perceived?
Right.
Which is something people run into, whether it's going into entrepreneurship like you, or whether it's just navigating career from company to company for those that are,
Mm-hmm.
in the corporate world, like all the doubts. And, you tend to think like, am I doing the right thing? You talk about like evolving and allowing things to the things that don't work to filter out and things like that. And when we talk about being mindful of like what's happening and letting your mindfulness lead you, which is something I believe in wholeheartedly, is like,
Mm.
when you're trying to navigate your career in the corporate world, let's talk about it. It's transferable to entrepreneurship as well. But um, being mindful of like when you're not fulfilled in a job and making sure you're aware of when that's happening, and then taking the next move, or having that point of self-reflection to figure out, is this even what I want to do, or is it what I want to do but it's not for this type of company? Right.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great point. And I think people, you get, very caught up in what's expected, what's expected, what looks right, what looks good,
Mm-hmm.
the optics of that. And then it's hard to be like, oh, this is not, and authenticity gets thrown around so frequently, but that's what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
When it's not, because you're essentially pretending. You're like, I'm trying to fit into this culture where I don't fit, doing things that I don't like doing for people that I don't want to do them for.
Yeah.
Why am I doing any of this? Oh, right, my paycheck and my health insurance, and that's right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's it's incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard, I think, to prioritize, especially when you're early on.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're early on, because you feel like that need. I don't know if that ever fully goes away, but as you get older, I feel like that that need to prove, and that fear of, I think it starts to change more from like, I know so much more than this person does. I can't even, where when you're younger, it's like, oh my God, I'm nervous.
Yeah.
I don't want to, do the wrong thing, where it's definitely, corporate world is very challenging.
Right. Yeah.
Very challenging.
Yeah. So, okay, that's interesting. And thank you for taking me through that. I think I'm curious now to tap into like, we talked a lot about, how you navigated your own journey and kind of what you let lead the way, which I would say is your mindfulness and your own experiences, and wanting to solve for those things. Talked about the self-doubt and things like that. I'm curious, when you think about your career changes that led you to where you are today, what sort of, now yours is unique, of course, in its own way, because the careers that you started out with, going from corporate to, owning your own business and running that, and then the growing pains of that, which are quite different, when you're in the corporate world and kind of in that quote unquote safe space, right? Because they've already established those things.
Right.
But I'm curious, what sort of things did you learn along the way, whether it be about yourself or about your journey from career to career? What were some of your learnings, if you had to reflect on that?
I think it was trusting myself. That was something I needed to learn, and I didn't realize how much I didn't trust myself. And I'm not suggesting that I fully trust myself now. I know there's still a ways to go, but I don't even think I even had the awareness that I didn't. As much you may have an opinion of it, you can have an opinion about it, but you're still not embodying it. Like, and I, maybe, here she comes, have had an opinion about that and thought that I knew, but the reality was my behavior. That's another big thing I'm big on. My behavior was dictating otherwise, and I think that just like basically fear and things but I wasn't even aware that that's what it was. It was like these blocks that I had, but it wasn't until later on understanding that it was about fear. It was doing the wrong things for the wrong reasons, and trying to solve problems that weren't problems, like that you make problems because you're avoiding the real problem. You're like, oh, it's this thing over here, and then allowing yourself to get distracted from the true core issue, because whatever that might be, you don't have any really awareness around it because you're essentially blocking it out because it's something painful. It has to probably do with something that needs to improve, something you need to change, some way that you're being that isn't fitting in correctly. So then we get, it's easy to get distracted by, it's this, it's that, it's these damn clients. It's,
Yeah.
we blame someone. And so I think that was also another, maybe, having the self-awareness to like, when you get like, like this isn't working or why isn't working, like stepping back from it and be like, oh, what's really happening?
Yes.
What is it that's not working? And what part am I playing in this not working? Because it may not be 100% my fault, but it's, I'm in it somehow.
Yeah. And how did you get through that? Was it just self-reflection? You got yourself through it? Was it talking with someone about it and digging deeper? Like, how did you?
No, just, I think a lot. A lot. No, it was a combination practice. It's actually part of what I do now, with clients, is taking them through this as part of the stuff that I was doing to process it within myself. So what I essentially do is I intentionally tap into uncomfortable feelings on purpose. I call it marinating in the gross emotions. It's kind of my way of wording it. And it's an exercise I take my clients through. And in theory, right? So if you look at your subconscious, so your subconscious is designed to protect you, but it can also be a jerk, right? It doesn't get it. It tries to protect you from things it shouldn't, it doesn't need to. You don't need protecting from anymore, but it doesn't know any better. And that's where that whole change is hard comes from. Change is hard because your subconscious is like, hell no, we want everything to stay the same, even if the same sucks. So the subconscious will do that as a way to protect you. This exercise is basically designed to sort of like give the finger to your subconscious of like, guess what? I can handle it. You don't need to protect me from, distract me from, cause me to pick up my phone, right? Pick up a drink, pick up a smoke, pick up a pill, pick up a whatever, pick up the remote, put on Netflix, compulsive exercise, like you name it, eat something, and all those things, right? Those are all ways that we deal with uncomfortable emotions, but oftentimes it bubbles up in us. We don't even recognize that it's happening and we distract. So this is a way to sort of bypass that and be like, no, we're actually going to sit here, and it doesn't have to be the thing, but we'll come up with something that you feel some shame about, or you've been, it's some uncomfortable, like discomfort, like, okay, what is it? And then actively feel that sensation in your body on purpose. Like, I know, I know how crazy it sounds, right? But purposely force yourself to sit with it.
Yeah.
Because it's by doing that you can actually desensitize yourself to it. Right? So your subconscious allows it in because you're directing it. It's not being triggered by some scary external event. You're like, I'm inviting this in and I'm going to sit with it. And then all of a sudden what happens is like you sit with it, you sit with it, you sit with it, you sit with it, it loses its power. So like that sensation, once you're able to identify it, you're like, oh, that's the thing. That's the feeling that I get when I feel like X, or when I call it my, whatever your word is, because we get very cognitively based when we talk about our problems, right? Like, because I was angry, because I was, they hurt my feelings. We use these words, but like they're connected to emotion somewhere. Like, what's the physical experience of that? And then spending time with that, not the label. I'm triggered, right? That's classic, like, okay, fine, fair enough. But where in your body? Where do you feel it? What's making you feel like? And being able to find that, identify it. Now, all of a sudden you've got the power because you're like, oh, it's that thing again. I know what that is. We already spent some time together the other day. I don't need to be afraid of it. And then because what happens is, right, so you start to feel that, and then your brain wants to fill in the blanks. Like, why am I feeling this way? The brain's like, because you're a loser. You'll never do anything good with your life. Remember that time you peed your pants, right? Because your brain wants to be right. So your brain is now going to try to come up with a reason why you're feeling these emotions. And it goes on your, like, worst moments highlight. And then we wonder why we can't get out of our own way. So it's basically that's how I did it. I was like, I'm going to sit and really feel really bad about this to the point that all of a sudden it doesn't feel bad anymore. And then you can look at it objectively because it no longer triggers you.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, all right, I can actually sit and go, oh, I'm not a big fan of that, but I can sit with it, and then I can make some determinations about actually what's going on, including owning my part in it without feeling like I want to kill myself. Because it's like, no, it's reality. Like, I'm human. I make mistakes and I see things wrong and do things wrong all the time.
Right, right. That is
You gotta be
so,
okay with it.
yeah, that is so interesting because I don't know. I just think you're so incredible because you have, it sounds to me like you've just found your way by just leaning right into all of it, like facing everything you needed to face head on. Even if you were afraid, I can't say you weren't afraid because I'm sure you were, you're human, but like
Yeah.
even if you were afraid, you faced everything head on. You worked your damnedest to figure it out, and then you did each time. Like, I'm not hearing you say, well, I spent some time in therapy and I had to lean on my network, and you're like, no, I did the work. And that's powerful because it makes what you give to your clients that much more powerful because you have, no one gave you the answers, you did the work yourself. And I just think that's huge, so I applaud you for that.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you. And I like how, yeah, and that's actually interesting. I didn't think about it that way. That it does, because I think part, again, fear. I always go back to fear. For it's always fear. Like, anytime you're like, I don't know what it is, I'm not sure, like, figure out where, if you're trying to, like, when you're doing a math problem, you down to the lowest common denominator, right? Like, you cross it all off, because eventually all of a sudden at the bottom, imposter syndrome, it's fear. Perfectionism, it's fear. Procrastination, it's fear. It's fear every single time. I just lost my train of thought. I was answering something else, but it was something related to fear. But I always look at that. I always look at, where is the fear? If I'm not sure what's happening and shit's falling apart, and I just realized I'm like sweating.
Yeah, go for it.
That's okay. I will look and say, where is the thing I'm afraid of? Where is it? And is it then, but when you do, like you said, I guess that's what it was, like you were saying about the leaning in. But when you do that, you're able to lean in the next time, right? And lean in the next time, and lean in the next time, and lean in the next time. But it makes it easier to do that, right? Because you're not as afraid. Like, the first time you do it, you're like, I can only go like this. I don't, but then next time I can go a little more and a little more and a little more, because you basically are deconditioning yourself. I mean, it's essentially, it's just the whole practice of it. It's like exposure therapy.
I can hear the passion in what you do when you speak. And of course, I tend to nerd out on psychological, topics like this. Just, I started out as a psychology major, and I just have that interest in, like,
yes, people's
behaviors and, the things that drive that. So I could talk to you about this all day long. I just think it's so interesting. But going back to the passion that really comes across when you're speaking about this stuff, and knowing the journey that has led you to where you were, even coming out of the corporate world, right? I'm curious, like, because it sounds like you've really, I mean, it goes without saying, you have gone through your career changes over the span of your time so far, and you have really kind of found your true passion and your niche. And I would say you found your fulfillment, right? Like, every day, I imagine you go home feeling fulfilled, versus maybe what you were experiencing doing the jobs that weren't really, what you were wanting to do or meant to do in this life, I suppose. So just tell me a little bit about, like, as you think about where you are today, because you've got your own practice. So just to kind of, like, summarize, I know we talked about, like, what you do, and we mentioned Knockout Wellness, but if you will, just kind of, like, you've got your own practice and where it's located and how people can find you.
Yeah, so I have my own practice. I'm located in downtown Lowell, Massachusetts, and they can find me at knockoutwellness.com. I'm also on Instagram, and it's at Knockout Wellness. And yeah, so I provide a variety of I treat a variety of pain related issues. So in terms of like, physical pain, emotional pain, I also work with athletes on injuries and rehabilitation and recovery. I do a ton of sports cupping, and yeah, that's how they can find me. So yeah, and if anyone has any, if you want to shoot me a message or send me an email, whatever, have any questions about any of the crazy things that I talked about, or you have any interest in learning more, I know it's very counterintuitive. We spend so much time trying to move away from the things that we don't want, right, and just towards all the good. And sometimes that's I think that's what gets us in trouble. But
well, I loved hearing your story. I love, the change and how you said, what you were doing before, and then now, like I said, it's so apparent the passion that you have, and the joy that it brings you. It really comes through when you speak. So I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
I hope that you're proud of everything you've done, because really, like I said, it's truly powerful. Just to hear it in one sitting. I know we've known each other for some time, but like just to hear it all in one package, it really is powerful. So again, kudos.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about stuff,
Yeah.
talk about my things, and this is great. Thank you. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it.